Hello, everyone. Welcome to Supply Chain Visit for Pharma podcast. We have another great guest today, Karen Betancourt. Karen, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Karen is most recently the CEO of Vanguard Medical Logistics, and she's joining us from Panama, from Central America. Such a cool place. I've been there just like a year ago. I've seen the Panama Canal. And have a very, Karen has a very interesting, background. Some major corporations like Cardinal Health. Prior to that, like Walmart and Amazon. So, truly a supply chain, enthusiast. So, Karen, tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you end up in Central America?
No, it's a great question, and I would say, like everything in my career, it's been a series of happy accidents and my general desire to go solve problems and then kind of see where the wind is going to take me a little bit. So what happened is I was at Cardinal Health, ran the enterprise logistics for Cardinal, doing a tremendous amount of technology things. We got an activist investor on the board, which is fantastic and really great for shareholders, but it meant disruption to what I was doing, which was bringing everything together. And so that coincided with my husband and I wanting to do a passion project of his father's when we got some bad health news. We went to Colombia for 7 months and we built something for my father-in-law, which was fantastic for him, but meant that I was out of the workforce for a little bit. And a headhunter found me to say, hey, are you interested in Panama? Of all places, I had never said, would I go work in Panama? But a great opportunity to bring all of the things I had learned about scaling operations, bringing technology, leading people into a space where a lot of people forget about Central America, and just bringing it and bringing world-class medical care to the population here.
Yeah. Nice. So I ran into Karen last year in Panama as part of a Georgia Tech Alumni Association event. So you're also a fellow alumni from Georgia Tech, right?
Yes, I am.
From the business school in operations management. So I actually had my minor in operations management while doing the PhD in the industrial engineering side. So yeah, go Jackets. Everybody likes talking about their background, and sometimes these backgrounds put people together and get happy coincidences, like with happy accidents, run into some people.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So, Karen, so we have prepared a lot of interesting topics, but one thing that I want to maybe like start off with, which is a topic that I didn't talk about before in this podcast, which is, because I'm an executive representing a technology company, and there are a lot of technology companies with now the acceleration of AI. So many startups are popping up left and right. Everybody's business case is that, hey, we're going to land large corporations and large companies, and we're going to make them run faster, leaner, more cost effective, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a very hard thing to do, right? So and you have been on the other side. You were that executive looking and selecting technology. So I want to ask you, how do you select technology for supply chain, and what would be your tips for technology companies when they position their technology for consideration for major corporations? So maybe answer the question from two different angles, from your angle as the executive, and then the things that you learned for the technology perspective.
Yes. No. Well, thank you for that. And what I will say is, being an executive in an operations practitioner, there is nothing you dread more than a LinkedIn invite from a new software vendor, which means you're going to get pitched by something. But you're constantly having people talking to you. And the question of how do you select? Well, you have to actually talk to all the vendors. I recommend that everyone take meetings with everyone. But the biggest problem that no one ever thinks about with technology is it has to solve an actual problem, not it would be nice or this is a minor irritant, but it's actually solving a real problem that the business is facing. And so the first meetings are always great. Second meetings are where you can tell that you're actually tackling a problem. But the biggest things and criteria that I used for software was, number one, had the company done research? Did they understand what kind of problems we were solving or that we needed to solve? Two, Did their solution appear to be any different than anything else on the market? There's a lot of people that put a new flash, the new logo on it, but it's essentially the same thing that 17 other companies are hawking. If 17 or 18 companies are selling a solution, I'm going to tell you, no one's actually really solving anything. It's something that you can code really easily, but it's not actually solving problems. So that is the biggest space. And then diligence. So especially when you're dealing with very, very large companies. Even when I was VP at Cardinal, I managed 1.3 billion in annual spend in transportation. So I had a lot of authority to approve things. But in a large company, you're never, ever going to be able to get one and done or 3 meetings and you got someone to sign off on something, unless it's like a $20,000 pilot. But you're talking ongoing integration, whatever that might be. That's going to be something that requires an awful lot of discussions, and it needs to align with business priorities, which means that sales has to be diligent but not annoying. So you have to solve a real problem, have understood who your customer is, and then know how to be diligent.
Yeah. So you just follow up, regularly, making sure the progress in happening regularly. But coming back to the ROI question, like being a technology provider, you kind of know what you're solving, or you at least think you do.
Oh, I disagree with you entirely on that. But go ahead.
Maybe some technology providers have no idea what they're solving for. They're just like, hey, here's a cool technology, please use it.
Yes.
But in this case, let's say they're actually solving a problem. But to estimate the real ROI or savings or whatever the benefit they're bringing is sometimes very difficult if you don't have the data with you, right? And here's a major corporation who may or may not share any data. How would you go about making sure that they do a fair job of calculating the business case? What would be the ideal process of doing that jointly or separately or outside in?
Yes. No, well, that's a couple of really good questions there. And the best way to do it is ensure that you're getting assigned an intelligent, diligent person at the corporation who's going to actually want to work with you. You're right. They're probably not going to give you the details to be able to do a full ROI. They're not going to tell you their IRR for this, segment of the business requires a 17% return. They're not going to do any of those things, but make sure that you have actually and experienced salespeople, experienced founders can tell when they're getting pawned off on an intern or someone who clearly has is still using an abacus versus someone who's really going to be doing calculations. So make sure you're getting someone that is really doing calculations. But the biggest thing where I think that software vendors get in trouble is they offer a solution. They have figured out how to solve a problem they think exists. They've made it look pretty, and it solves something that is a type 2 savings. So if you're the CFO or you're in finance at a huge company, you want type 1 savings. And type 1 savings is actual dollars stripped. So yesterday we spent $120. Today, because Evren is a genius and he came up with a solution, it's $19. It's $101 saved. Real dollars shown. The problem with, particularly in supply chain technology, is we are solving things that are cost avoidance. So, for example, you will see people who go and like Green Mountain or one of those invoice spaces. They are the type 1 savings that they would have is we paid $1,000 we shouldn't have paid. We got $1,000 rebate minus Green Mountain's cut. That's $850. What will instead go wrong is when there are four suppliers all competing on a lane, all bidding on a lane, or doing parcels, and your solution maybe says, hey, we're going to go from 3.1 packages to 2.2 on average to this customer. That savings of 1.1 packages is cost avoidance, and attributing that cost avoidance dollars, first of all, as well as and accounting for it in finance of dollars that you would have spent if we weren't brilliant, but are in the future, right? Is something that
Yeah.
every CEO it cringes. Especially with publicly traded companies, you are in a space where there are a lot of accounting rules. You cannot account for dollars that you may have spent in the future. And I have a really good example of this because I'm getting a little wonky in it.
Yeah.
So at Amazon, I was part of ATS. And so that is their middle mile operation that allows them to sort their packages. Everyone now has heard of Amazon Logistics. They have gone and done amazing things. I haven't been there since 2018, but the sort center network started in 2013. And so what the sort center network allowed them to do was to sort packages, and then they could use USPS and avoid overrunning UPS and FedEx. Well, the cost savings of shipping something via the UPS or USPS versus UPS is probably $4 a package at that time. They had really great rates. They were sorting, they were doing all this kind of stuff. And we used to have big discussions with finance to say, okay, well, it was $4 per package. We're shipping, 8 million packages a day, that we are billions of dollars saved, right? Every single year, billions of dollars.
Yeah.
And finance's answer would be, well, first of all, after a year, you've cycled through and your solution is no longer giving me type 1 savings. And number two, you actually cannot have given a billion packages to any other carrier. They wouldn't have been able to achieve it. So that is not an intellectually robust way to declare it. So you have the people in middle mile who are working their butts off, enabling something that doesn't even work, and they don't get credit for that solution in the financial number. It's not going from sending 11 trucks because your truck utilization got great to 7. It's, in finances, mythical numbers, because you would have to do this. And understanding that tension, particularly in supply chain, of how finance needs to be able to tell the SEC, yes, we are not doing crazy things and all this kind of stuff, is the biggest barrier of why people have problems getting their software solutions, because they're all type 2 savings. Type 2 means you can't get rid of full headcount, you can't get rid of full trucks, you can't get rid of full routes. You actually can't prove to the level of financial declaration necessary that all of those dollars are real.
Yeah. So you're saying, let's say, hey, I saved an hour here, an hour there, 5 hours here. In total, I have spent 7 hours less on this process, but you're still an FTE. I'm paying you the same amount. So that's something that is not going away, but sorry, well, you cannot claim. So the financial numbers may not reflect it. So operational efficiency is there, but it doesn't turn into hard savings. I mean, this is a great way to put it. It's sometimes, or actually oftentimes forgotten that companies are in the business to make money, and to make money, you need to actually spend less money or earn more money. And in the prioritization, I think my findings is that sales and commercials always come first. And then comes the operational savings or efficiencies. Like sometimes it's almost like at all costs, make sure you earn that revenue, right? Then now that you're earning that revenue, now let's look into the operational efficiency, see if we can deliver it at a less cost, right? Initially, companies are willing to spend as much money as necessary to earn that revenue. So sales always comes first.
Yes.
I think a part of our challenge as supply chain and manufacturing and logistics professionals is that, like, we are basically like, we're organizing whatever is left over in terms of, make it work, make it happen. If you make it happen, nobody tells great job, but if you don't make it happen, you're in trouble, right? But no, this is great. Obviously, we can talk all day long about technology and supply chain and how to get systems in place. But if you were to, let's say, strip away the ROI for a second, let's say that everything being equal, all companies are delivering similar savings or value. Besides the financials, what type of high-level criteria you look at for, like, technology providers to select?
Yes. So number one, they do not promise the world. They will not tell you, oh, everything is fine. Oh, we'll figure it all out. That is number one red flag for, you're not actually big enough to be able to let me allow you to manage a significant amount of my business. In my experience, and you are super experienced with this as well, dedicated large corporations require regular sprint information, clear communication, a rollback plan, all of these kind of things. You cannot just push updates unless you're Microsoft with Office, who updates constantly now and says, screw you, we don't care if you're confused. That's one approach. They get to do that because they're Microsoft, right? But for everyone else, particularly in supply chain, it's mission critical. To your point, sales and marketing gets a lot of credit because they're selling things, but revenue recognition can only occur when the service has been provided, right? So revenue recognition is huge, and you can never ever put that at risk. And so that means that your supply chain has to be infallible. And the software that your supply chain is relying on cannot break. And so it's, do you understand the problem that you're solving for us? Do we trust you to operate this entirely independently? Do you have the level of savviness and engagement to understand what we require? And then are you, the word that's springing to mind at the moment is ethical, but are you upfront about, no one is perfect on either side. Are you going to be open and honest about your failings? Those are the big things.
No, these are great criteria in the enterprise segment, right? Like, you're not solving something small, you're delivering something big, and your system will be pressure tested from all angles, from difficult users to different edge cases that you never thought of, and you need to code and develop along the way. So no, I hear you. This is great. So this was like great, but it's also quite generic in, like, we're not talking about anything pharma yet, but I want to take this conversation to right into pharma and pharmacy. And I know you were in a very critical, mission critical service line of like getting the medicines to the patients, to the end patients. And part of that involves like radiopharmaceuticals, things that are like, you know, you measure in hours, not in days, right? In terms of how soon that needs to go there and on time and in full. So what are the difficulties, you know, from your experience of dealing with like pharmaceutical logistics, especially that last mile, as the world of pharma moves into more personalized medicines? We're not talking about big bulky batches being shipped in warehouses. We're talking about my specific drug. Where is it? Where's my stuff? How do you see that? Yeah.
It's a great question. So radiopharmaceuticals have actually only dealt with being in Central America. There's an incredibly talented group of radiopharmaceutical and nuclear medicine people at Cardinal Health. That was the only part of logistics I didn't have. But we actually compound drugs in Panama and fly them that same day, 4-hour half-life, 4-hour delivery, to a direct patient injection in Costa Rica and in Colombia. So it is a space where minutes, not hours, are critically important. You cannot afford to be wrong, and that requires the highest level of training. Your entire team needs to know what's going on, and you have to be able to proactively plan for disruptions, especially when you're talking about unique compounds. Radiopharmaceuticals are one, or where it's an individual's own cells that have been used to generate it. You cannot afford to have that go wrong. You can't lose that shipment. And so you have to be more engaging and engaged with the patient, to the point where you notify the practitioner, you're going to have to reschedule this because Louisville, Kentucky had a snowstorm and no flights are getting out. That's unavoidable. But what does it look like that? It's much more critical. It's a very high touch space. And you can't afford to get it wrong, which is different than the 35,000 daily courier deliveries of the regular pharmaceuticals, which is massive volume, tons of deliveries. They all have to get to their pharmacy before they can then be dispensed for pickups, or if they're going to a practitioner. All of that is highly coordinated, must be at clockwork, can't handle any deviations, needs to have individual destination level information. It's a space where technology is absolutely the solution, but it's so many moving parts that a lot of people have not yet, to my knowledge at that scale, are not yet able to provide all of the transparency necessary to say,
Mm-hmm.
okay,
Yeah.
35,000 daily courier deliveries, all of them with a minimum of 10 totes. That's a lot of totes to be tracking in a razor thin margin.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, as the world moves further into personalized medicines, how do
Yes.
you think the pharmaceutical companies prepared for this? Are they prepared for this? Is this still like we're figuring things out, or are we like up for a
Uh-huh.
disruption because technology needs to come in and replace those high touch points? Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you say?
Well, I would say all of the above. No, they're not ready for it. Some of the pharmaceutical manufacturers are bringing some things in-house, or they're partnering directly with a FedEx or a UPS to do delivery. We saw a lot of this with vaccine distribution, but especially
Mm-hmm.
some of the more specifics. It is going to need to be small scale, tightly controlled with technology that gives you that same level of, if you can DoorDash and you can get your Uber information, you need to be able to do that for patients,
Mm-hmm.
but do it in a way, this is the part that makes it complicated, that the DEA doesn't see an increased amount of thefts, or, you don't create unintended
Mm-hmm.
consequences. I never
Mm-hmm.
thought I'd have to deal with the DEA or the FBI or any of those things on a regular basis. Once you're in the pharmaceutical world, you're dealing with that. And
Mm.
so we need better technology. We need it to be less middlemen, less touches. And it needs
Yeah.
to be done in a way that bad people can't subvert the goals by stealing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is a big problem for pharma because, like,
Hmm.
also, according to World Health Organization, this is a number that is thrown around for a few decades now, is 10% of the world drug supply is subpar or fake, or
Hmm.
it's not real. And
Yeah.
even in the Western world, it could be up to 1%, which is,
Hmm.
with the drug prices going up, 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 there's always a
Hmm.
big incentive for somebody to copy that and try to
Completely.
sell that. The reason behind the track and trace and serialization, which is now like 10, 11 years old regulation in the US, the Drug Supply Chain Security Act, is put in place to prevent this. So now the
Hmm.
transparency is almost there. Most manufacturers are compliant, most wholesalers are compliant.
Yeah.
FDA is in the last few months of enforcement, which keeps getting delayed
Hmm.
and delayed. But I think we're
Yeah.
almost there in terms of the pharmaceutical supply chain. One thing that you mentioned that is like less middlemen, right?
Hmm.
Because I think the whole supply chain needs it. There is this emerging company, Mark Cuban's pharmaceutical company, that
Yes.
basically
Hmm.
targeted to specifically cut down the middleman and figure out a way to make drugs cheaper. So, do you think that is going to be a trend? There's going to be more and more of these, like, find a way to, cut out the middleman, figure out a way to do it
Yeah.
cheaper, because we have a lot of waste in the system.
There is a tremendous amount of waste in the system for sure. What I will say in defense of all of the pharmaceutical distributors, most of it's a fundamentally incredibly complicated space that has been disrupted by additional people. PBMs, or pharmacy benefit managers, have managed to claw a lot of the dollars and profit out of it. The goals in the US government with the rules about Medicare and Medicaid always paying the lowest amount, which influences the weighted acquisition cost, or the WAC of what that everyone else pays, adds an extraordinary amount of complexity. I think Mark Cuban's Cost Plus drugs is phenomenal. He's tackling the easiest, lowest hanging fruit, though. Generics is the space where the largest profit margins are captured by corporations. The largest amount of revenue is tied to brand name drugs, where the dollars are largely captured by the manufacturers or the PBMs. We're very bifurcated, and then these regulations make it extraordinarily difficult to operate effectively with the actual movement. What I will say from my experience at Cardinal is we were extraordinarily efficient and effective at the movement of drugs. The reimbursement rates, though, that are captured with that do not cover the cost of having a highly effective, highly technology-driven space, because so much of the profits are captured upstream of the distributors. And so,
Mhm.
because it's so complicated, yes, it's ripe for disruption.
Yeah.
technology to solve it. There need to be more Mark Cubans and his go getting it there. It needs regulatory change as well to be able to free it
Hmm.
up.
And who knows, with the new administration, maybe like the change is coming at an increasing pace, and
Yes.
there's a
Hmm.
table conversations nowadays with executives. I was in DCAT this
Hmm.
week in New
Yeah.
York City. Everybody's talking about tariffs. Everybody's talking about AI and
Hmm.
disruption, and seems like the government is moving in, like making things happen in ways that are faster than before. And obviously, some things are more
Hmm.
disrupted than necessary, but we need to change this for sure. Like, this industry is now 20+% of GDP in the US, and
Hmm.
we are paying the highest prices for everything. And I think it's
Yes.
time for that disruption.
Oh, it absolutely is. And what I will say is, it does feel a little bit like, have you ever seen those cartoons where people take the chessboard or the checkers board and they just throw it up in the air? It does feel a little bit like we've done that.
Yeah.
But we have too much regulation, or regulation that drives hidden costs a significant amount. And so anything we can do to take away some of that will absolutely benefit customers,
Hmm.
insurance companies, the corporations themselves. Life will
Hmm.
be better if we can get rid of
Yeah.
some of these regulations.
Yeah.
So I'm eager for
No,
that
I
portion.
I love the ideas, and I mean, in my one of my visions since 10+ years, since I started supply chain visit, was fully digital, fully autonomous, self-driving supply chains.
Okay.
Then I came back on down on that like vision a little bit into, like, let's just
Okay.
focus on the factory
Yeah.
first. Like, let's do the self-driving factory first, because
Hmm.
that's something that we can control better, because under one roof, and belongs to one company. Even that is
Yes.
very challenging, very
Mhm.
extremely difficult to do that, and let alone the whole end-to-end supply chain. So, but we are getting there. 20 years ago, when I was working at Intel, I have
Uh-huh.
seen a self-driving factory fully automated. you know, they're building even a better and more automated one now, 20 years
Mhm.
later, at the cost of $20+ billion. Well, pharmaceutical manufacturing
Yeah.
is not going to cost that much, but the
Mm-mm.
same level of transparency, digitalization, and
Mhm.
automation is needed to take the cost out of the system.
Yes.
And for
Mhm.
that to happen, I think one of the biggest challenges, and this is in different segments of the industry, is apparent, is the balancing demand and supply. It's a
Mhm.
cyclical business. We build so much capacity, all of a sudden we're only utilizing 10-20% of the factory,
Yes.
and the costs are so high. On the other hand, there's like a shortage on certain drugs, and European Union is passing, critical medicines act to cope with this. FDA is publishing list of drugs that are short. So it seems like the sales and operations is never aligned. And as supply chain
No.
professionals, it's on
Mm-mm.
us, right? Like, why are we not aligning this? So what is your experience in, sales and operations? Like, are we even making progress here, or are we doing the same mistakes for the decade after decade?
Okay. No, no, we're not making any progress. I think there's a couple of things that are intrinsic within, particularly pharmaceuticals, but pharmaceutical and medical supply, because we've seen it all. Some of it is unpredicted, right? You cannot predict that there's going to be a pandemic or a particular flu strain that is dramatically different, that changes something, or Ozempic.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great example of demand massively outstripping available supply. It takes time to bring those things in. So that you're never going to be 100%. You're never going to know it's a big hitter. You
Yeah.
can't make 6 months of supply assuming it's going to be a blockbuster drug, because your shareholders are going to go, so funny story. What were you actually thinking, right? With that.
Yeah.
So it's always going to be a little bit difficult to predict. There's a separate piece kind of going to the EU with the protectionism of critical drugs and ensuring. That's a phenomenal idea. And I will say, I say this sometimes as I'm a native Californian, so I come from a state that firmly believes that you should act for the benefit of the whole of society. They get it wrong many times, but I understand why. The problem is, who's going to pay the bill? And how are we communicating it effectively so that corporations and businesses can happen? We talked a little bit about the Digitization Act. It's 11 years old. It took 10 years to actually be enforceable because it was so complicated, right? It was an idea ahead
Mm-hmm.
of when it could be enacted. And so we're working on that piece. The third part, you see more in medical supplies than you see in pharmaceuticals. But where sales makes, they have a quota, they need to hit something, they push something, they forget to tell supply chain, they forget to tell that the only way they could win the contract for this 150 pharmacy account was if they committed that every single delivery had to be done by 8 a.m. They're like, oh, that's easy, not a problem.
Over promising.
Operations doesn't find out.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell later. So I have a great example of this. So back when I was at Cardinal, we signed a new account. It was $1 billion plus account. Fantastic, huge. And as part of that, they signed a master agreement that for everything in the United States that was for delivery, it would have to be delivery 5 days a week by 11 a.m. Perfectly reasonable, right? Nobody looks at that. They're focused on, what's the percentage? What are the obligations? All the rest of the terms and conditions. And with that, we went to go implement. So you sign the contract. It's 14 months later. We're finally turning on everything. None of this moves super fast. And that's when we talk about their 4 locations in Guam. It's U.S. territory. It's part of the United States. Anytime you look at this, you go, oh, United States territory, it's perfectly fine. People forget that Puerto Rico is a United States territory. That's usually the problem that we have with sales, but we're at Guam. And the salespeople were yelling and very, very annoyed with my team, who said, that's cool, but we fill that out of Alaska or California to Guam. And they said, there is no excuse. You must do a delivery every day in Guam from the United States. And so having that discussion and then reminding people, I at one point, in probably not my finest moment, I actually said, hey guys, I need you to understand what this is. I'm going to pull this up. And I shared my screen and I typed in Guam on Google Earth. And then I started zooming out until United States, contiguous United States, and Guam were in the same image. You should do that. It's at least a 17-hour direct flight. There makes no sense to charter a plane every single day. We would lose too much money. But that's the kind of things that sales doesn't think about, the people contract management doesn't think about, and operations gets signed up for, and then will fail. And if you're not having those real conversations, or have a pain in the butt VP who will go, we're stopping talking about this. I said, I can open a depot. I'm happy to do that. Or you're going to have to understand that I'm going to deliver once a week. Yeah.
So I mean, I have similar stories of like when the sales, like, the most important thing for sales is hitting the quota that month, right?
Yes.
And they're looking at the portfolio of, let's say, 200-300 SKUs. They're thinking which ones can sell more if I give a little bit of discount. Yeah. And they just say, hey, let's sell this particular product. They give a little discount. Cardinal, ABC, or the new name, Sankora and McKesson, they're like eager to buy it at the discount. You sell the whole inventory all at once. You hit the quota that month. The supply chain guys are like scratching their head in the S&OP meeting, like, we have no inventory left for next month's delivery.
Yeah.
And I can't make it fast enough. So what do? Well, you're going to lose now the ability to supply that drug for the next month. Now, but you still have the same quota to hit for sales. So what do we do now? Let's go and disrupt another SKU where we have actual inventory. Let's give the discount there, and then let's wipe clean the inventory, and then you create artificial demand signal for production teams to produce stuff that is not a real demand. And then by the time they're like, oh, yeah, we finally got it. Like, we got like 2 months of supply based on the last demand. And then, but there's no more demand because the wholesalers bought it at bulk.
Completely.
They don't need it anymore. So they're like, oh, now we have like 2 years of inventory.
Well, exactly right. And then you layer in sales is at a critical junction. They want to retain a client. So they sign them to a new contract, but they allow them as a contingency to return everything that they purchased under the last contract that they still on their shelves, to be able to re-sign it. Right. So there's all these things where there's some tension caused by, all of these are very large public companies. So they have 13-week reporting periods. They have already given guidance. Nobody wants to have the egg on their face that they don't know exactly what's going on. So there's a lot of pressure to do it. I completely understand what happens. but it is very short-term thinking that drives a lot of ripple effects that people either aren't taking the time to explain, or they've delegated the sales activity so far down, but without the feedback loop of talk to me about what's going on. You can overcorrect into so much oversight that everyone
Hmm.
hates it, which is usually what happens. So you have a boom or bust thing. It goes terribly wrong. Then everyone says we have to
Yeah.
review every contract known to man. They do that for 3 weeks and realize that sucks and nobody has enough hours in the day. So then they go back around.
Yeah.
It's a tension, and it's very real.
I guess we will never run out of a job in supply chain.
No.
Like, come AI, we are not afraid from you. Yes, you can come in and replace a lot of things, but you're not going to
Yes.
replace the entire supply chain. Well, we are wishing that we can do that, but with this much complexity in the system, it's going to be like, let's stay in the edge, keep eating up some processes, but you're
Mhm.
never going to solve this like human behavior, which is misincentives basically to
Well, it's misaligned in incentives. It's missed signals. It's changing underlying demand. It's a space where AI is going to probably be able to help us. We'll probably be able to catch things faster, but it's never going to go away. Humans are involved, and the world is involved. Reality,
Mhm.
and those
Yeah.
sometimes collide in unfortunate and new ways.
So now that we switch into AI, like
Yeah.
tell me some use cases or case studies that you have seen done
Mhm.
successfully in supply chain, especially in pharmaceutical supply chain, and where it will not be doing anytime soon, like any good dent on the process, like SNOP meeting, for example. There's so much
Yes.
complexity. Like you cannot put an SNOP AI in place easily. We get
No.
that, but where can we put an AI, in the peripherals
Yes.
to start helping us?
Yeah, well, the number one space where AI is already able to do what it needs to be done is proactive engagement and alerts to late deliveries. So, particularly when you're talking about a pharmacy, or there's three
Hmm.
practitioners in an office, those three people are the only people who need to know that it's going to be 20 minutes until the delivery shows up, as opposed to at 9:30. Being
Hmm.
able to track that, to give information that, hey, this route is at risk. This departure, you're continually 2 minutes later every single Saturday, right? There's going to be a problem here. You need to dig into that. That's a space where
Yeah.
machine learning algorithms already need to be applied. That data has not always been readily available, such that because I explain that and somebody goes, we've been able to do that for 15 years. I go, funny story. No, you couldn't, because the data wasn't stored effectively. So
Yeah.
the algorithms existed, but the data didn't, to be able to do that. So connecting that
Yeah. Great
in an
point.
individualized way for just the people who care,
Mhm.
that's a space where AI makes an awful lot of sense and can
So
improve.
like smart
Yeah.
alerts and predictions maybe that says, hey, like we are not
Mhm.
gonna deliver by 9:30, but I'm predicting
Yes.
9:50, right? That
Mhm.
20-minute may be important, some if it's a radio pharmaceutical, and not giving that information may be critical or
Yes.
detrimental.
Well, I would say your example of radiopharmaceutical is a space where the drug efficacy impact is that impacted the most. But the biggest problem, honestly, is a boring one. When there's only one pharmacist on duty and he goes on lunch or she goes on break, or it's about to be the end of they will refuse delivery. And then you have to bring it back and you have to recondition
Mm.
and you have to do all of these things. So it's a very ordinary space. So like when, for example, CVS and Walgreens switched to being closed during lunch, that was a negotiation that we had to have with them to tell them these routes and these deliveries can be accomplished at this. We can't have that store make that change this week. We need it to
Mm.
be 2 weeks later. Those kind of things
Mhm.
are extraordinarily impactful,
Mhm.
and very difficult to do.
Mhm. Mhm. It's funny that we didn't have data for this, and there's a lot of AI startups coming to
Mhm.
market with all these great, brilliant ideas because they
Mhm.
learned about the tool, the model,
Yeah.
and their assumption is, and I tell this jokingly, like their assumption is well, there's a lot of data in supply chain and manufacturing. We're going to put this AI model. It's going to spin out a little prediction and a recommendation, and we're going to do that, and that's going to be improving our efficiency. They come into the space with these like idealized ideas, like
Yes.
show me where the data is, and they're like, well, we don't keep track of that data. Well, maybe we have some data, but it's like in a pretty bad shape. It doesn't have
Yes.
all the details. Well, I need those details to be able to create a feature set for my machine learning algorithm. If it doesn't exist, then the whole year needs to be spent on properly capturing the data. So these are the things that the big assumptions of the AI enthusiasts, that they forget that the pharma manufacturing, pharma supply chain, often we don't have the data. You need to start from scratch, like collect the data properly.
Exactly. And I think we're going to start having even more discussions about there's a lot of focus on data retention. What does that look like? It's very extraordinarily expensive still to maintain that much data. What does that look like? How frequently is production pushing it to your repository database? Like the boring, crappy part of data retention is a problem that most companies
especially when you're no longer doing it on-prem, and now you're paying AWS and Amazon and Google to host it for you, and they're going to charge for it as well. And it's like, a very big cloud bill, waiting for you.
A massive cloud bill. And then you'll get legal that will come in and go, hey, we've passed a corporate rule that no one can retain data past whatever, right? Those are real things. Those are driven by real needs. It's real business. And supply chain is usually caught in the middle. And you're absolutely right. The AI developers convinced that all of this data exists. Completely convinced.
Are you more like an optimist or pessimist when it comes to this, like, AI taking over the world and technology is going to make our life a lot easier, especially in the context of supply chain management?
Oh, it's an excellent question. So I would say I'm never pessimistic about anything. I'm always an optimist. But I would say about AI, I'm a pragmatist, which is I've been around it long enough to say, okay, cool. That is a freaking amazing idea. How are you going to solve that problem given this, this, and this? And I talk to people, and some of them have really good ideas, and they actually really understand the issue. Supply chain, we've been hearing about this. We were supposed to already have lights out, automated, warehousing for everything. We're supposed to have autonomous deliveries, drones. I worked with drone company as well. All of those technologies have failed to, as of yet, eliminate every single problem in the supply chain. I imagine AI will absolutely do the same thing, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we probably will have a hell of a lot fewer analysts. Operators will be more effective. We will have a lot of improvements. Things will gradually get much, much better until we look around and then our world has changed. So I'm kind of, I'm more
gradually, and then suddenly.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. And I think that as long as we talk about it that way, I think we're in the more of the realm of it's feasible.
Yeah, but I think let's not forget the fact that it's happening. And if you don't plan for it, at least to start changing with the trend, then we are, leaving our companies behind, and that's not good in a competitive world, especially in the wholesaler space. Let's say your job is efficiency. If you're not efficient enough, you're not making enough money, and others are going to capture the market share. So it's not, how we should compete. And more middlemen should watch out, because AI and automation can replace them, because what they're doing is pretty much matching demand and supply, or cross-docking, or holding and shipping. There may be better ways coming with more transparency. And I think Mark Cuban is onto something, defining disruption points in the supply chain.
And we absolutely need more creative people who are willing to try to break something to fix it. We need it fixed. So it's ripe for disruption. It's just, let's stop saying we're going to be on Mars in 2 years. That's a little extreme. Bring it back to realism.
So, Karen, I know you are not a shy person on LinkedIn, and you're always sharing your inspirations and stories and trying to inspire others. And want to give messages towards, like, you young, professionals building their careers. So what would be, let's say, top 1 or 2, advice that you would give to a young supply chain professional I'm going to ask the question in general, not specific to pharmaceutical or medical fields, but supply chain professionals, up and coming, fresh out of college or about to finish. What would you recommend?
Well, I would say always volunteer or tackle the tough things. No, number one, if you are bored, you are not pushing yourself hard enough. So tackle and do something differently. And number two, don't be afraid to speak up. And I say this as a person who volunteers my opinions, and in many times, even currently now, people will be like, "Why are you talking?" or "Who asked for your opinion?" But supply chain is never going to be more than it has been, and it will never improve if we don't keep pushing farther. So, young supply chain, volunteer, go tackle the tough problem. Figure out if you don't, if you've got a unique way of solving it, and solve actual problems. Don't just go along with what's the easy thing to do. That would be my advice.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. I'm sure we can stay here for another couple of hours to talk about the supply chain careers, the technology. But this was a super upbeat and fantastic recording. Thank you very much, Karen, and thank you for joining us from all the way from Panama.
Thank you, and I appreciate it. And hopefully, I'll be back in the U.S. In the next 6 months or so.
Looking forward to meeting in person as well.
Yes, it'd be great. Thank you.